Hello, Math 30-1. Now, before we get to our lesson today, I have a little secret for you guys to try and figure out here. Okay? So it is about this right here. It says y of f of x transforms this equation. So if we have the negative in front, how does it transform this equation? So that's what we're going to try and figure out. So here we go. Here are my two graphs. We have x squared and the negative outside, x squared. So all the function was x squared, so we multiplied the function by a negative. What do we end up getting? There's my graph. Here's the black equation, and the bottom there's the red equation. Let's take a look at the next one here. We have that, okay? And it looks like this. Remember from last class, we noticed that -3 means it's moved how many? 3 over to the right. Okay? Let's try the next one. Maybe you're starting to find a pattern. We have x cubed. So here's the black equation, goes like that. And here is my red equation, it goes like this. What is happening? What does this negative sign do if I put a negative outside, if I multiply the whole function by a negative? Okay, here's another one. What happens? There's my black equation, there's my red equation. So what is happening? Think of also if I rearrange this and I multiply both by negative, both sides by negative, really this is negative y is equal to f of x, right? So I want you to think about that as we're going through this. So it's like replacing y with negative y. So what is happening here? Can you make up a rule for these equations? What is my rule? Okay, so pause, write down what you think that negative on the outside is, or if we replace y with negative y, what that does to our equation. So now I have a second secret here, okay? And this one here is about the same thing, except instead of replacing y with negative y, we're replacing x with negative x. And this is what happens. So right there, we have x squared all over, and we replace x with negative x. And this is what I get for our graph. It looks like this. That's interesting. Well, if I simplify this, what's negative x squared? Just x squared, isn't it? So we have the red is really over the black. They're the same graph it shows. Well, that's interesting. Let's take a look at this one here. So we're replacing x with negative x. So we want to know, how does this equation transform this graph? Well, look at this. Look what happens. Let's take a look at my next one. Okay, we're using the same equations as the time before, except we're just altering it a little bit. Let's take a look at that. Here's my original equation, which is the black, goes like that. And here's my new equation in the red, goes down like that. This is what happens when we replace x with negative x. And now let's try the very last one. And this one looks like this. Okay, negative, here's my original, and here's if we replace x with negative x. Do we see what happens? So I want you to pause right now and write down any rules you can before coming back. What do you think is my secret about these? Okay? All right, welcome back. So, as you guessed, today's class is all about reflections. Okay? So if we do this here, this is essentially the same thing as saying negative y is equal to f of x, right? That's what this here is saying. Multiply both by negative y or by -1, and the negative goes to the y side. So we're replacing y with negative y. Now, if we're affecting the y value, that means we're affecting our up and down. So in this case here, every time if we found out from our concept attainment or a little secret lesson there, we end up getting a reflection in the x-axis. When we replace y with negative y, we get a reflection in the x-axis, or a vertical reflection, okay? That's the same thing as saying if we put a negative in front of the whole function, we get a vertical reflection, or a reflection in the x-axis. That's the most key thing. Well, let's take a look. Here was our second one. We replaced x with negative x. Well, anytime we're altering x, that's horizontal stuff. So here, this here is my y-axis. We had a reflection in the y-axis, okay? So it reflects in the y-axis, which is a horizontal reflection. It's moving horizontally. It's a reflection in the y-axis. That's every time we replace x with negative x, we get a reflection in the x-axis, okay? The only things that will change are our horizontal values. Now, this one here is like something we looked at before. Look at this. To that. What is that called? An inverse, right? This is another way of writing inverse. Now, we learned earlier in the chapter before, in chapter 1, that an inverse is a reflection on the line y equals x, right? So it's a reflection on the line y equals x. So basically, my x and y values change. We learned that last one. So this point will go there. This is an invariant point. This here's an invariant point. Okay? Now, what's my other point? Well, let's take a look. This one's 1, 2 down. So we're going to have to go. That's 1, 2 down. So we're going to have, 1, 2 down. So we're going to go 1, 2 over. So my graph, oops, there. So my graph is going to have to look something like that. Okay? That's it. So there's my graph. It's going to be a reflection in there. All right? So that's that one. The inverse is a reflection on the line y is equal to x, because our x and y's are switched. So here's just a quick summary and review. We have if the graph of f of x is reflected along the x-axis, okay, then it is the graph of, well, y, this is vertical. If we look at this, my positive y's become negative y's, and my negative y's, right here, my negative y's become positive y's. So it's like this, negative f of x, because we're replacing y with negative y, okay, which is y is equal to negative f of x. All right? Now the next one here is reflection of the y-axis. Okay? So the graph f of x is reflected in the y-axis. Then the graph is negative x. Okay? We're replacing x's because look, right here, if these x's are negative, these x's are now positive. It's reflected over. This was negative, this is positive. This was positive, this is now negative. So my x's are switching from positive to negative. So if it was positive x, it's now a negative x. So it's a reflection in the x-axis. Let's take a look at the next one here. If the graph f of x is reflected in the y is equal to x, that's that line going like this here, then it is a graph of y is, that's not a y, of y is equal to f negative 1 of x, so the inverse of x, or we could say x is equal to f of y. Okay? Because my x and y values are switched, right? What was x is now y. What was y is now x. So y is equal to f of negative 1 x, or f of y. X is equal to f of y, because they're switched. Right? We learned that a couple lessons ago. So let's continue on here. Now it says the graph of the function f of x is shown. And it wants us to sketch that one there. So what is this here? This is like saying negative y is equal to f of x in some ways. So all my y's that were positive are now going to be negative. And all the ones that were negative are now going to be positive. So this point here doesn't change. This point here, we have negative 4, 6. My y value is 6. Now it has to be negative 6. So go all the way over, 4, negative 6. This one here, which was negative 2, 6, is now going to have to be again negative 2, negative 6. Because my y values that were positive now must be negative. That's what we're saying from now to that. And the ones that were negative must be positive. This point doesn't change. And this point here, my y value was negative. It was negative 3. Now it must be positive 3. So I put that, there's positive 3. And this one here, there's no change because y is 0. 0 is 0. So neither negative nor positive. So let's now draw my new graph. And it looks like that. There we go. Reflection in the x-axis. Okay? Let's take a look at the next one here. X is replaced with negative x. Well, that means if it was a positive x before, now it must be negative. If it was a negative x, now it must be positive. Okay, so let's look at that. This point here. Well, that's negative 5 comma 0. The x must change to positive 5. So that point goes there. Next point is right here. Negative 4 and 6. Well, that doesn't change. Y's aren't changing. The x's are being replaced with negative x. So negative 4 turns to positive 4. So go right there. Okay. Next one is 2. Negative 2 turns to positive 2. So we go there. All right. Then this point here is an invariant point. There's no change because my x value is 0. My next point is there. Well, that 5 is going to have to be negative. Oh, that's 4. It's going to have to be negative 4. I believe, yep, 4, negative 4. And then we have 7 will have to be negative 7. And that's 3 and 7 is right there. Okay? And then we have 9 must turn to, this 9 must turn to negative 9. So that's right there. So let's draw this out. It's going to look something like this here. And there's my reflection. It's a reflection in the y-axis. Okay, so there we go, reflection in the y-axis. Now my last one says we want this. So all my x becomes y's and my y's become x's. All right? Oh, so let's first start with this one. Negative 5 and 0. So this is my first point. Negative 5 and 0, so that becomes 0, negative 5. So that point goes down here. I'm going to put a little 1 so I know that's point 1. All right, next point. Negative 4 and 6. So that becomes 6, negative 4. Right? Because x and y switch. So 6, negative 4 is right there. That's point 2. Okay, let's take a look at my next one. 2 and 6, or negative 2 and 6, that becomes negative 2 and 6. Oops, sorry. That becomes, whoopsie, 6 and negative 2. Negative 2 is right there, right? Because these must switch. And let's take a look at the next one. This is 0, comma 4. That's going to become 4, comma 0. So 4, 0, right there. Okay? And then my next point is going to be there. So that line is nice. It's just straight. And then what is my next line here? Okay? Then we have 7 and 3 becomes negative 3, comma 7. So we go negative 3. Oops. Negative 3, 1, 2, 3, and 7 up. And we're going to get 6, 7 right there. So let's start connecting these so I don't get too confused. So it looks like that so far. And then my last point is 9 and 0, so that's going to be 0, comma 9. So that's right, oops, right there. So it looks like that. So there is my inverse. Gives me something that looks like that. I just switch my x and y's. Okay, so it says, the graph drawn in the thick line is a reflection of the one drawn in the thin line. So my thin line's my original, my thick line's my reflection. Okay, write an equation of each one. So this is f of x. What is this one here? I look at this. My line of reflection looks like right there. Doesn't it? So this is a reflection in x is equal to f of y. Or, this is, oops, it's f is equal to f of y, or it could be y is equal to f to the negative 1 of x. Those are the two ways of writing. Let's take a look at the next one here. I look at it, it looks like it's a reflection along this line. There, 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 there. So this is the same as my positive x's turn to negative x's, right? Negative x's, positive x's. So that's the same thing as y is equal to f to the negative x. My last one is, take a look at this. Oh, maybe not. There we go, it's reflected this way. It is reflected this way. My y's switch. My positive y's become negative y's. See? We have a negative y turns positive. Positive y turns negative. So y is equal to negative f of x. And that's that one. Okay? We couldn't go this way for this one, so it's either on one of those three. Okay, our next section here is on combining reflections. So for these combining reflections, I'm going to just help you out with this, just as a little helpful note here. So it first says step 1 is a reflection in the y-axis. So I look at that, that means are we replacing x or y? So that is every x is replaced to negative x. Okay? So if we do a reflection in the y-axis, everything goes like this. And we have there, to there. So this is my new shape. So that is y is equal to f negative x. And then it says a reflection in the x-axis. Okay? So then we want a reflection in the x-axis. So I'm going to have my y is replaced with negative y. Because that means for reflecting on this here, all these turn to negatives. So my graph is going to look now like this. Okay? If we look at that, if I did y and then x, or if I did x and then y, we ended up getting the same thing, which is kind of interesting, isn't it? So it doesn't matter the order of which we really do our reflections here. Now in this last section here, we'll get to in classes. You'll find some interesting things once we start when it comes to order of the inverses and stuff like that, okay? As soon as we reflect along the line y is equal to x, our order might change a bit on which one we do. It might matter if we do the inverse reflection first, then this, or this reflection, then the inverse, okay? Or this, and then the inverse. That might change a bit. But we'll discover that tomorrow as we work on these more together, okay? But right now, we're just going to end it right here. So we have the first half of the class to do tomorrow, and then the second half, once you've done those questions, you can start working on this, and I'll help you with this discovery on this page tomorrow. Good luck, and I'll see you tomorrow.